Okay, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Got some people already watching us on YouTube, and I'm sure more will be joining as we're streaming. I'll let our panel participants turn on their video themselves whenever they're ready to do so. My name is Joey. I'm a British Academy postdoctoral fellow at SOAS, University of London. It's my pleasure to be able to host this webinar for our linguistics department. Today, we're going to be talking about promoting languages online and having a conversation with three people who are actively promoting their own languages online in their free time, and also have two linguists with us to give their perspective on what are the possibilities in this area of promoting languages through social media. Before we get started, I'll say a few words of introduction. I want to emphasize that this is a conversation. This is not a research team. We're not sharing any research results. We're really just exploring this topic and some of the complexities there. You can be part of the conversation if you're watching on YouTube. I'll try to flip back and forth to those of you who are there. So if you have any questions or if anything comes to your mind while you're watching us, feel free to add your question on YouTube, and we'll try to get your questions to our participants as well at the end of our conversation. I'll just say a few words about who's here with us in the room. Let's see if I can share my screen to show that. So with us in this conversation are three people who are promoting their language, JC Firth-Hagen, William Fanene, and Ben Okon. And if you've seen that already on our promotional material, maybe you had a chance to check out the content that they're creating online. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, if you're able to multitask a bit, go ahead and check out what they're doing online. They're going to be sharing about their experiences. I want to give you a bit of an idea just in case you don't know the background of these languages, so everyone has a clear idea of how different these three languages are. The Gwich'in language, Athabascan language, so it's spoken in North America, both on the Alaska side, the American side, and in the Northwest Territories in Canada. There may be about 3,000 to 5,000 or more Gwich'in people. But it's estimated that maybe about 500 people in that group are still speaking the language. The second language we're going to be talking about is Samoan, a Polynesian language spoken in a place that couldn't be much more different than Gwich'in, Pacific Island. The islands of Samoa make up mostly the independent state of Samoa, but there's also some American territories that are Samoan islands as well. There may be about 250,000 people in the Samoan Islands, and they use the language as their primary language, and there may be another 600,000 or more Samoans in the diaspora, primarily Australia, New Zealand, America, and their language use is going to be significantly lower. Efik is, again, a very different language in a different place. This is a map of Nigeria and Cameroon, showing where Efik is spoken on the southern coast of Nigeria, bordering Cameroon. And there may be around 600,000 people who use this as their primary language, and potentially up to another 2 million people who use it as an additional language for a certain context to communicate with people from other groups. Also with us is Robert Elliott, who's Associate Director of the Northwestern Language Institute at the University of Oregon, and Sally Kokomofonye, who among other titles is Professor of Linguistics at the University of Chicago. So we'll get to them a bit later in our discussion. Okay, so with that introduction, let's start our conversation. It's okay if I turn some of our videos back on for our panelists. I will. Hi, Ben.
Morning.
Hi, JC. Great. Good to have you
Morning.
all with us. Let's start with you, JC. Would you mind giving us first a greeting or a short introduction in your language?
Linguistics Nai, She, JC Firth Hagen, and you've which in Inkly and you've Shigonly. I think I said that backwards. Good morning, everyone. My name is JC Firth Hagen. Which in from Canada. There's also which in Alaska. I'm born and raised in the Nunavut, Northwest Territories, Canada, currently living in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm Gwich'in Dinjiju Gwich'in, and I'm the daughter of Sylvia Firth and Willard Hagen, granddaughter of Sarah McLeod Firth and John Firth, Margaret Hagen and Willard Hagen, and that's a traditional introduction in my language, which I said in English, but I would say where I'm from and who my parents and grandparents are. And hi, Shidri Shonihli. My heart is happy to be on this panel with you all. Hi, Chomasi. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, JC. Now, some people might know your story already. There's a video, a short documentary about why you're doing this as well online. But for those who don't know you, could you give a brief introduction of why did you decide to pick up your phone and start promoting language online through social media?
Yes, Masi, thank you. Promoting my language, which in on social media, has been a more accessible, easier way to get a conversation going and raise awareness towards our languages, in particular Indigenous languages, such as my own, that are in danger of not being spoken in like a generation or two, as I've been told for a majority of my life. Social media is such an accessible way to get a conversation going around so many age groups, from our youth to our elders. And because there's less than 500 approximate speakers of my language, standing at 5% of my nation still speaking the language of around 5,000 or so Gwich'in, and yeah, just creating a social media platform and a hashtag just follow has been like an amazing, incredible initiative and way to start a conversation about my language, Gwich'in, teaching the language, creating learning resources, building a conversation and raising awareness. And it's been about 5 years now. And here I am on a live panel for the University of London with so many amazing language champions.
That's great. Thanks, JC. We'll come back to you with some more questions, but just to introduce our other panelists first. Will, would you mind giving us a greeting or short introduction in Samoan?
Sure. Talo falawa ya touma, lo ingo o Williamu Whanene, o se whaionga Manipule o Matonga Anga Samoa, whaftaitira la mole a wanoa, I talano atu ya tō I rene aso. Basically, my name is Will Whanene, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to be here today. And I live in Illinois, in the United States. Far away from many Samoans, and I actually started, I grew up in the Samoan culture most of my life, and then I moved away to come to college, and but I didn't know the language, so one day I just said, I want to know, I want to know right now. So I knew a lot of words, and I knew that most people in my generation were like myself, and you know, once I just started putting these resources together, I kind of put the language together for myself. It just made sense, and it never made sense before. And then I just had this fire in me to show other people, because I felt like I connected the dots, and I wanted to share that with people like myself, because there's a lot of shame that comes with not knowing your own language, you know, especially if you grew up in it. And you know, I'd never figured out why I couldn't connect the dots. But then once it all just kind of clicked and made sense, I wanted to share it with everybody. So that's pretty much my story on why I got online. I just wanted to share it because it just felt like good news, and I didn't want to keep it to myself. So
yeah, that's great. Thanks, Will. We'll come back to you as well, but first to introduce Ben as well. Ben, would you mind giving us a greeting or introduction in your language? Sorry, I think you're still muted. Can you unmute that? Great.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Ndima, ekomdo, amin kere Ben Okon, amin di andik beb iko efok, amin to obi efok, amin konyung di andik beb ke ufong wen taifio, emi di orente of Jarvis University, Mike obi Cross River State. Okay, that's just a brief introduction of saying that my name is Ben Okon, and I am an language teacher, and I'm also a graduate research assistant with Dr. Jarvis University here in Cross River State. I'm so happy to be here this evening. This is evening right now in Nigeria. It's a beautiful opportunity to be here. I actually have the strong passion to ensure that the Efik language is promoted and the Efik language is preserved over time. So that's just what really informed the whole essence of me trying to put up one or two things about the language online. So basically in Nigeria,
Let me follow up with a more specific question, Ben, because people might wonder, Efix's language has, millions of people speaking it. So why particularly did you feel like, oh, I need to still promote this language, even though it seems like a lot of people speak the language?
Okay, yes, so many persons speak the language. We have over 600,000 native speakers and also probably 2.5 million second language users. Over time, the Efik language was one of the major languages in Nigeria, as it were. It was rightly the very first language to have an orthography and the very first language to have a dictionary. But with time, it has really, the interest in the language has really reduced. So that's why I thought that social media is one of the major places where people gather, a major community where people gather. So I had to come up with one or two things to ensure that first of the people, because level for the language is quite low, and that's why it hasn't really grown to the level other major languages in Nigeria are. You are muted, Joey. I can't hear you.
I should unmute myself before I speak. For those who maybe don't know the Nigerian context, of course, there's hundreds of languages, and there's a few other languages that have even more speakers than Efik that kind of seem like more majority languages in that context. So it's a very complex context in that country. Ben, let me come back to you with a second question as well. What are some of the successes that you've seen, the encouragement that you've seen through what you're doing in social media, and what are some of the frustrations and challenges?
Okay, I've really been encouraged in a very big way. Firstly, a lot of persons who are not currently in the UK, in the US, and Canada as well, they were quite excited that such a project is on. So I got a lot of them reaching out to me for personal classes because most of them migrated while they were kids and they did not have the opportunity to then learn the language at birth. And also I've seen so it has been a source to reawaken the language in the minds of the people outside the country who are probably migrated before time, and also currently people. It has been a source of inspiration as well, because I've seen so many persons have reached out telling me, oh, this is great. We wanted this. I wanted this for my kid. I wanted this for my family and the rest. So it has been worthwhile. I see a lot of persons getting on to also do the little they can in their own social space. I think in the last couple of months that I've been active with on social media, I've seen up to 3-4 persons who have also taken up such responsibility because they're like, wow, this is great. So if somebody is doing this in my own language, I can also do that. Okay, as for the frustrations, it has always been acceptance, trying to get so many persons to accept the fact that it's a complete language, it should be used, not only in the domain of household, it should be used also in the social media domain. So that has been a major source of frustration, and also the ability to have pedagogical resources to teach children as well as also been a major challenge in one way or the other. But generally, it has been a great endeavor to be part of.
Okay, it was a bit unclear with your connection. In a few places, it sounds like you're saying that the challenges are people's mindsets about where the language can and can't be used and should be used on social media, and the availability of resources for teaching and for children to use the language.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Great. Thanks for sharing that,
Yes.
Ben. JC, we'll jump back to you with those same questions. What's been encouraging for you in terms of seeing impact and people responding positively? And what have been some of the challenges of trying to promote the language through social media?
Yes, very happy to say that the hashtag Speak Which Endemy has been described as a positive movement. There could be a lot of like negativity in the media regarding like our communities and our nations, and I'm happy to be able to create something positive and to share it. And it's been so positive. I think on all my social medias for hashtag Speak Which Endemy, it adds up to around 30,000 people I'm sharing to. And that's across so many different social media platforms, as is written on the poster, like follow the hashtag on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, where I'll help create and share work made by myself and others to teach Which End on social media, and to share other work that's been done by such as like Which End Tribal Council that works with Which End elders to create and language content and preserve our language and teach it. And it's been very beautiful, inspiring others to learn the language, create their own hashtag Speak My Language to Me movements. And I've been able to travel around the Arctic, giving presentations, as well as doing it remotely, such as right now, and to the Canadian UNESCO organization, as well as in Mexico. And I'm very happy to be at such like a pivotal movement for languages and language revitalization, such as being the year of Indigenous languages, and now the decade of Indigenous languages through the United Nations, I believe. And what can be challenges or obstacles is like, like when our elder passes away, like it's a whole library. It's such an important member of our nation, and we lose so much knowledge. And it's hard when there's like, we don't even know how many speakers there are really of my language. Maybe there's 200, maybe there's 100, maybe there's less. I was in a 1 week long immersion languageness program for my language, and it was really amazing. But it's like, the reality of my language, like our language speakers may not be speaking all the time, and it's only like maybe the same few elders that are working on the language. And there's like, thankfully there's a lot of us like young people that are interested in the language, but just kind of seeing it from different standpoints. And of course, it's always could be a little frustrating. How do I get more people interested in speaking the language? And always like, especially when it comes to like social media algorithms, trying to get information out there as best as I can. But at the end of the day, like we're all doing our best, and there's always going to be the ones that are interested and want to learn the language. So, Haicho, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, JC. Same questions for you, Will. What have been some of the positive impacts and results you've seen and good feedback? And what's been some of the challenges that or obstacles you continue to face?
Well, I get some great feedback every day. It's, when I wake up every morning and then I read all of these messages from people, and they tell me that they learned more, in the past couple of days than they've learned their whole life. That kind of stuff, it really touches me. So, and it keeps me going, because at the same time you do have, some negative stuff. I'll get to that in a minute, but A lot of people say that they teach their kids through me, like the kids just sit down and watch, my Instagrams every day and on YouTube as well. And so I do have to, kind of be careful on, keep it really kid friendly, because sometimes I try to mix entertainment with the educational component. And so once I realized that, and I know the kids are watching me, so that's kind of it's not a bad thing, but it's kind of difficult. So I guess that's one of the challenges. And to be recognized every day, you get a lot of celebrities and stuff that I've never had that before. So it's kind of like, wow, that people are actually watching and they're paying attention and they're sharing it. So those have been the main things, is just getting the word out there, because it hasn't even been a year where I started doing this, and it's like it just seems very impactful, and that's what a lot of people have been relaying to me. In terms of challenges, a lot of elders, that came from Facebook. So I avoided Facebook because a lot of them, they're just older people have their ways. So I went to Instagram purposefully. I started on, I did Twitter a little bit, but I didn't get much traction over there because they're really, 40 characters or 140 characters. But on Instagram, I was able to kind of, capture them in that 1 minute, and do as much as I can. But the elders or the people the native speakers, they kind of, some of them feel like you shouldn't teach on social media. So, which I still think is kind of interesting, but and that's not everybody, but that's been one of my challenges. Is it respectful? And that's just something that I'm learning. Like, I don't know if social media is new. Teaching on social media is new. I don't know what you mean about. So I try to keep that balance as well, being respectful in the Samoan way, because Samoan is all about respect, even in the language. Even one character, you can be disrespectful. So I try to make sure that I really walk that line. And then also too, in terms of resources, there's not many very available resources out there. So you have people that speak only slang Samoan, which is very different from the book Samoan. So then when I'm on there teaching, especially when I first started, almost every day someone say, that's not a word, that's not right, that is not this. But I get everything from the book, and then I cross-reference with mom and people in my family. But they're older. But then you have younger kids saying, I never heard that word before. That's not, that can't be a word. And then the same thing, the older people will say, well, who says that? That's not. So I had to make sure that all of my information is, something that, first of all, is true and accurate. And then also, something that everybody can relate to. And then if it is just slang, I have to bring that out. If it's just something that they say in the books, I have to bring that out. So that's just another challenge, but it's not really an obstacle. It's just things that I need to be very cognizant of when I'm making my videos on social media.
It sounds like you have lots of different audiences that you're potentially reaching at once, and maybe they have conflicting priorities, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay. Thanks. Well, we'll be sure to get back to some of these topics. So I want to bring in our linguistics experts, Robert Elliott and Professor Mufwenye. If we can get your videos rolling again. And Robert, we'll go to you first with the question. You've worked a lot with teaching languages and creating digital media to help teach as well. We don't really think anyone's probably going to go through a Twitter feed or Instagram stories and learn a language entirely that way. But how does social media, from your perspective, become effective in helping people who want to learn or encouraging people to learn?
Thank you, Joey. First of all, Shukmaitski, good morning from Oregon. It's a real pleasure to be on this panel with Will, Ben, and JC. It's fantastic to meet you and hear about the work that you guys are doing. It sounds really, really interesting and dynamic and useful for the audiences you're working with. Joey, yeah, I think the short answer to your question is yes, people are not going to learn language necessarily completely from social media or from digital sources, but at the same time, it does add a lot. And so I want to try to summarize what it can add, I think, because I'm hearing a lot of that from the panelists today of exactly what they're doing, that we can see across broad spectrums of different language groups that seem to really be working and helping in these situations. So I think, first of all, technology really functions as an extension or an augmentation of the learning process. Nothing can really substitute for that intergenerational learning, the natural learning of language. Whenever that's possible, that's always the best. But the social media, the technology can supplement that and augment that and help that encourage it and go along. So there's some ways that I think that happens. One is we've heard a little bit about working with younger learners, and I think younger learners in particular gravitate towards technology. I've seen it with my own children, how they just really go to technology, and also when I'm visiting immersion schools with languages, and you see the children really want to get on technology, a lot of them, and they feel comfortable in that space. So I think it's very important that that languages are represented in those spaces because there's a natural gravitation towards there. The second thing I'm thinking about is the time and space aspects that technology can break down. So it's the anytime, anywhere learning nature of that technology can do, so that you can pop out your phone at home or on the bus or on your break at work, and you can interact with the language in those places. And without technology, you have to have another speaker of the language close by in order to actually do that. So that anytime, any place aspect breaks down the barriers of time and space that I think that can allow more opportunities for working with language. The third thing I'm thinking about is how the language can be validated in using technology. So I've seen cases where sometimes young people feel that our language, there isn't really a lot of use for our language. I'm not sure where. It's kind of an older thing, but by seeing language represented on some of the newer platforms, people feel that, oh, okay, my language has a right to be there too. It's great to see that, and there's a place for this, for my language here. It doesn't have to be left out of this new realm. So, but just by seeing that, it can. Some people talk about language prestige or relevance of the language. Some people don't like that term, but I just wanted to say that I think that people recognize their language online, and that validates and makes them feel that there's a place for their language. The final thing that I'm thinking a little bit about is that it just carves out another space or domain or a place that people can use the language. So you know, a lot of the languages that I work with, we're in similar to JC's case, where we have very few speakers, and some of the languages even there are no speakers left that I've worked with, and so they're working with documented materials. So the opportunities for using language are very, very few, very rare. So what I think the technology can do is actually create spaces that if you're in a very dispersed case, like Will was talking about, how they've got people all over the place. He's in Illinois and the communities are back in Samoa. He can actually create a room to interact and use the language using technology that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So those four things, I think, are little aspects I'm hearing from each of the panelists today, and I think that they're using technology in really in a lot of the ways that we know that it helps benefit, even though we know it can't completely supplant face-to-face natural language learning.
That's great. Thanks, Robert. In a bit, we'll come back to some of those topics. So if Will, Ben, and JC, if you have any questions or comments you want to make, maybe keep those in your mind or write them down. But first, we're going to go to Professor Mufwene to make sure he has a chance to give us some input. Professor Mufwene, you've written a lot about why people do and don't speak languages, why they start or stop speaking a language. And in some of your work, you've emphasized the economic pressures that people face. And that seems to be really one of the overwhelming factors in why people shift from one language to another. In these cases, some of the languages that Will, Ben, and JC are promoting aren't languages where the people necessarily feel that socioeconomic pressure. They don't necessarily get an immediate benefit from it. But still, these people are online trying to encourage others to speak the language despite the lack of economic motivation to do so. But from your perspective, what other motivations are there? What can they tap into when there is no economic motivation to speak a language, how do they really encourage people to change their language use?
Mborbe Zinime often Sakok, Moro Congo. I just said in Kiansi, greetings to all of you. And I said my name as it would be said in Kiansi, often Sakok, with my last name said often, coming at the beginning rather than last. And I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I've been gone for over 40 years. During that period, I think I have come only twice or three times across people that could speak Kiansi. So my Kiansi is very rusty. Any Muliansi that heard me out there probably would be laughing because I spoke it with an accent, although it is my heritage language. Joy, coming back to your commentary and question, what sounds particularly relevant to me in this, in the context of this webinar is the affordability of the technology. And one thing I want to underscore here, to which Robert Elliott alluded, is the fact that the mass media are complementing what would be our natural social interactions. In the modern world, traditional societies, I should say traditional communities, have been disrupted. A lot of them have become discontinuous, so that members of these communities are no longer at the same place and don't have the traditional opportunities to practice their languages. And these are very critical factors, either in sustaining the language if we stay together, if we stay connected, and the mass media are doing precisely that, or if you cannot stay connected, then you practice your language less and less, then your competence in the language becomes rusty. If your competence is rusty and you have children, you cannot transmit the language to your children anymore, because sometimes you think, what's the point of trying to speak a language that I don't speak well anymore? There are many other factors. But what I also want to highlight here is that the new technology of mass media comes with a lot of constraints. It's a technology that is predicated essentially on electricity. Whether you use a telephone or you use your computer, you need power. And if you look at space maps of the world in the dark, you'll see that a whole lot of the world is still in the dark. There are only some places that are really well lit. And that means that there are a lot of people out there that cannot afford electricity or simply do not have access to electricity at all. And even when you have a telephone and your telephone doesn't have to be connected to a source power all the time, there are times when you cannot recharge your telephone, which means you cannot remain connected with the rest of the world. And if you have a computer, it's the same kind of constraint. And that's where economic factors become particularly relevant. In a territory, in a polity where economy is strong and where the telephone is easily affordable, where people have access to electricity, the social media are going to do a great job. If you are in a polity where a large proportion of the population can afford a computer, and a lot of these apps that you can use, you use them on your computer, and you have regular access to electricity, the mass media are going to work fantastically. But one thing that we have discovered around the world, especially during this pandemic, is that even in countries of the economic north, of the global north, that is the developed countries, there are still segments of the population that are disenfranchised. So these are limits that we have to overcome. Otherwise, it's super that people have become creative and imaginative enough to domesticate the technology and make it to serve some of our communicative needs and make it to serve our endeavor to revitalize or maintain languages that are really endangered around the world. Okay. And what I appreciate very much about this technology is that even if you are thousands of miles apart, you can still remain connected with your family in your homeland or with your friends that have gone to distant places. And the more regularly you interact, the more likely your knowledge of the language is going to be maintained, and your language is not necessarily endangered. Even if you cannot use your language in the public domain, you can still use it in your private domains, and these are the ways, some of the ways in which you can sustain the vitality of a language. When I said my knowledge of Chianti has become rusty, it's largely because when I emigrated from the Congo and came to the United States, there was no cell phone yet at that time in the 1970s. Most people in the Congo could not afford the landline phone, and therefore I couldn't communicate regularly with members of my family. I'm a linguist, I can write my language, but the people back home couldn't read what I would write in Chianti. And so technology really constrained me from using my language on a regular basis. But that technology depends on economic power, which means there's a whole form of economic development that must be factored in. So endeavors by Ben, by Bill, and by JC are really praiseworthy. They should be encouraged, but we should embed these endeavors in the broader context where we exert more pressure on politicians to invest more in economic development so that they can support such efforts. That's what I can say.
Great, thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, so it sounds like in summary, the motivation there is the social connections that you're able to maintain with people who are far away, and that's a major factor in what would motivate people to continue speaking their language using the technology. But of course, that requires this minimum amount of economic development that's not present everywhere in the world. And so using social media, of course, is not a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone. And I think even these three languages here, are going to have different methods and different places where it works better or not. But let me go right back to Will, Ben, and JC. After hearing from Robert and Salikoko, do you guys have any questions or responses, or what are you thinking about in response to what they've shared? Ben, you want to unmute yourself and go ahead?
Okay. I think I would like to ask Robert's question, and it's also based on the observation I've had. I know I have a good community on Facebook who are actually very interested in following up what I do. And while trying to teach on the counting system of the Efik language, I had the idea of maybe getting a call credit recharge pin, and I changed the numbers from English numbers to the Efik numbers, so that anybody who could crack the Efik numbers could actually get the reward, which is the PIN, the call credit, what they will use in making telephone calls. Okay, so I discovered that messages and posts like that do attract traffic. So Robert, with your experience in teaching language, could you please talk more on the place of reinforcement and rewards in motivating people to learn language, either first language or second language?
That's a really great question, Ben, and something people are really looking at for the last few years. There's something called gamification that they talk about when it comes to language learning technology. And gamification basically means making these things like a puzzle, or there's an award or a reward or a badge that you get when you work through a set of material, so people feel like they've gotten that reinforcement. That's exactly what you're talking about. So the fact that you kind of came up with that on your own, I think, is wonderful. That there's a reward. They get the phone card by solving the puzzle, by figuring out the numbers. That there's a lot of evidence that suggests that that technology can do this, and that it's very effective for keeping learners coming back for more. They get really engaged that way. That said, ultra competitiveness is not a part of every culture, and so being overly competitive, sometimes you just want to watch those boundaries a little bit, so that people aren't feeling like, I never win, or there's sometimes cooperative learning is also quite useful, where you get people cooperating rather than competing. So I think knowing the cultural group that you're working with is really important, and probably also for many groups, kind of mixing up what you do. So sometimes it's more cooperative learning, sometimes it might be a little bit of competitiveness. But I think that idea of experimenting and trying things out is perfect. That's wonderful. It sounds like a really good way to go.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Will or Jason, do you have any questions or comments you want to throw in?
I'm just kind of taking it in. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, thank you to our speakers. And I just want to say thank you for mentioning, Dr. Professor, excuse my pronunciation, Sally Coco. Like a lot of my nation doesn't have access to the internet or connectivity. And that's really important, a really important aspect, especially as we move forward in the digital age, to how people without a connection or even electricity are kind of getting left behind and even ignored in some cases. So I just wanted to say something about that. It is near and dear to my heart, and I hope to work further connecting people that aren't connected through social media as an example. And to Robert, I'm just curious to see what do you find that works when it comes to social media initiatives and language revitalization in particular, for languages that don't have very many speakers or any at all? Let's see. Thank you.
So was that a question, JC, that you want to know what works?
Yeah, if you don't mind answering.
Well, at Oregon, we have 9 federally recognized tribes and other groups, and each group is very different than the other group. And then we're working with other, and then seeing the diversity of language situations and contexts. Everyone is really different. So it's hard to draw any broad conclusions that of what works across situations. I did want to say something. I did hear like Will talking a little bit about one caution of working with elders who sometimes don't feel the language should be put out. So that's always a tough balance, because sometimes elders feel that it shouldn't be recorded. But at the same time, we know that the younger learners are engaged and interested by this. So how do you balance that, respecting what the elders' wishes are, and what the young people might be engaged with? And so that's such a tough balance to do. And so, people I've worked with, it's just kind of having to find a slightly different way to work with that, that works for them and then their community and their elders. I mean, and I would say the same thing. I don't know that I could say any broad thing that works. Sometimes I think it's important, though, that like we're seeing right now with the COVID happening, that we didn't have conferences with Zoom like we're having now. We didn't have meetings constantly like Zoom like we have now, and everybody has had to just jump in and do it. And we've all made mistakes. And that's I think is but we're all learning and getting better at it. And so Joey is doing a fantastic job with putting this kind of conference together and getting us communicating ideas. And so I think for a lot of the social media stuff, you have to just jump in and try it, being respectful of the elders' wishes and other people of the community. But at the same time, don't hesitate if it's not perfect. Don't wait for just the right opportunity. Try something out, and you will make mistakes, but you'll learn from that, and you'll have a better next time you go about it. You'll be better at it, and you'll find what works for your community. And also, the other thing that came up was for the audience. Like if you're working with young kids versus older people, you might have some different kind of humor that's involved or engagement. So just you have to jump in and do it and try it, and you'll learn from that. So don't sit back and wait for the perfect. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough. I guess would be my suggestion on that.
Thanks, Robert. Will, did you have a question or comment as well?
I just want to say I absolutely agree with what Robert was what he just said, and it's very encouraging too, because I mean people say some nasty stuff, you know, coming from online. So you know when you do make a mistake, you're almost ready to just give up. Like why am I even doing this? But you have way more. Well, at least I do. You know, way more people encouraging you and thanking you and all of that. So, but I mean, almost every day I make a mistake. If you let other people, you know, if they tell me, yeah, you know, I'm making mistakes every single day. So, you know, just trying to figure out my community. And I guess, you know, I'm one of the only ones, and just like everyone else here, you're one of the only ones, if not the only one, doing it for your community. So, it's just I guess just a matter of staying encouraged and having the thick enough skin to make it through all of that. And I guess I would suggest, you know, maybe documenting everything so that someone else can come behind you and not make those same mistakes. You know, hopefully that's something everyone, at least that's what I'm thinking from after what Robert just said and what everyone else is saying. You know, putting something together, I don't know what you call it, maybe a curriculum or something where people are, they just kind of know the rules, or at least what worked for you. And then, you know, can kind of, you know, make a road for someone else to go so that they don't have to go over those same obstacles and, you know, stumbling blocks, so they can just get right into the content. Because ultimately that's what I want to do. I just want to put the content out there so that people can learn. But when you're going through social media and you don't have a way, like you don't have any other reference, it's like all of these things are blocking you from getting the content out, because no one's ever done it before, at least not that I know of. So and if there is somebody that has done it, I would like to get their, you know, I could pick their brain so I wouldn't have to go through a lot of this side stuff, you know.
Could I just add something to that? Because you
Mm-hmm.
made me think of something that I think is also I think that's super critical to chart what you do to help others that are coming later. But the other thing is a lot of technology platforms come and go. So what's popular now will not be popular in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years down the line. So what I think is really, really important to do or valuable to do is to keep those source materials easily adaptable to a new environment. So keep them stored, keep them labeled well, keep them so that they're ready to be repurposed into some other technology platform that comes around and becomes popular a few years down the line, and you won't have to recreate everything from scratch. So be careful of something that you put everything up there, and then when that product is gone, it's all locked in there. You want to keep those original language materials, which are like gold. Those are so valuable for you. Keep those for yourself and for other people that may end up working in the area as well.
You made me think of TikTok.
Yeah, I that social media are telling us something about how technology can be used to keep languages alive. the social media are telling us that you can extrapolate from that particular level and use different languages in the media in general. There should be room for sharing time in the larger media and making different languages present in the media. But this is also predicated on economic development. And there are ways of solving some of the problems. In places where people cannot afford individual TVs, for instance, there may be a central TV in the village, large place where people gather, and they can go and watch TV in their language. Okay, and everything needed to be broadcast at the national level. It can be organized so that people can see this at the local level. And so here we are talking about economic development on two levels, at the level of individuals, but also at the level of governments, at the level of nations, where they can give opportunities to people to practice their languages. And speaking of motivation, you get more motivation when you see other people interact in your language. Then you find it useful. Okay. Very often people give up their languages because those languages become redundant, or should I say useless in the environments in which they are because they have no motivation for using them. Several people have said in the literature, well, people lose pride in their language. It's not a matter of pride. What people lose are opportunities to use the language, and we should create those opportunities. And technology is there to enable us to contribute to creating more and more opportunities for people to use the language.
Yeah, thanks. That's really important. That promoting languages on social media is, you know, one part of a bigger picture. You also need the space and the opportunity to use the language. And you also need enough structural support, or at least not any structural oppression that's keeping people from using the language as well. We've got some questions coming in from YouTube, so I just want to get to at least some of those before we have to wrap up our session. One was a practical question for Will, Ben, and JC on what platforms you're using. I think you're all using different platforms for different reasons in social media. So what's been your experience? What works for what context, and what's your preference for social media platforms?
Okay. Personally, I use the YouTube platform, the Twitter, and also LinkedIn and Facebook. Yes, so I think the experience has been massive. Basically, people will adapt short text because they won't want to read much, and people will be very comfortable with animated videos on YouTube, and also probably some videos on Facebook to capture the attention and then move. So that's what I do.
I had a bit of trouble hearing you at the end there, Ben. Can you just repeat the last thing you said?
Okay. I said that I use YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. I think the question was the platforms I use, and each of these platforms, I ensure that, okay, for example, like the Twitter, short texts are okay because people wouldn't want to spend much time to read on long threads. And also on Facebook, some short trivia just to capture the attention of people. And also on YouTube, probably some animated videos and something they could play with.
So longer content on YouTube and just short bits on Twitter, Facebook. What about you, Will? You said you preferred Instagram for your audience. Are you branching out to other platforms as well?
Right. Well, I'm also on YouTube. The same videos that I put on Instagram, I put on YouTube as well. But I didn't really promote it as much. I made an app earlier this year, so that app kind of takes people to YouTube. I don't like I said, I don't really promote the YouTube. I probably should. But Instagram, like I said, most of my audience, they're my age and younger. So if people 40 on down to 5 years old, and again, like I said, Facebook really didn't work for my community. because like I said, most of the elders are on there, and they just had they had something to say about everything I put out. So, and then I figured you already know the language, so I don't need to be over here anyway. I started trying to do a TikTok, but I just couldn't figure out the platform, and then by the time I was really about to get into it, I heard it was going to get shut down, but it didn't. So I just left TikTok alone. So right now I'm on Instagram, and I do have my my online class. So people come to Zoom a couple times a week, and we'll learn and we'll speak on there. But for the most part, in terms of social media, it's primarily Instagram for me.
Have you seen any overlap with people that you've encouraged to use the language through Instagram, going to those Facebook groups and becoming more active participants in using the language?
That I'm not sure about, because I rarely use Facebook. I only go on there if I get a notification from a family member or something like that. But that's I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something I'm going to check. What I encourage everyone to do on Instagram, or people that message me from other platforms, is just to go out and use the language. And just use what you learn, because there's so many, and Samoans don't even realize how many dialects and how many people speak differently just around the world. Like, Samoans are all over the world in different pockets. So I just tell them to go out and use it. And I just kind of teach them a general book format, and then they'll just have to adapt to, because whoever they're around, they're gonna tell them, you need to say it like this, or you need to say it like that, or they'll just pick up how they're speaking it. So, and I've heard a lot of that. They just said, okay, we left the class, or I tried this from Instagram, and then I went out and spoke it, and I just kind of adapted. So it's effective. It's just a different way of doing it.
Great, thanks. JC, what about you? What's been your experience with different platforms?
Yeah, for me, it's I can say that Twitter over the years was like my #1 platform for a while. Everything I posted there's so much engagement, and now it's kind of leading to more towards Instagram. I get a lot more engagement, comments, but on Facebook, everything's kind of shared more widely. As an example, I had like a few people help me advertise this panel. My YouTube and SoundCloud doesn't really get much traction, but I also don't really advertise it. But like, as long as there's a hashtag to follow on major social media sites, there's video content to learn and SoundCloud content, like, I'm happy. Anyone that just wants to learn could just type Kuch in, and then my hashtag speak Kuch into me will most likely come up. And yeah, other than that, I'm just really just pushing content out in the world for anyone that wants to learn. With YouTube, it's tricky. I think that there's 2 different YouTubes now, like a child-friendly YouTube and a general YouTube, and I don't know much about that. And I was also thinking about diving into TikTok because it's so popular right now. But I looked at it, and for someone that's almost in their 30s like me, like, I don't really understand how to create content on it, but it's so popular right now. And I really like the point where it's how fast social media sites can come and go, which is, yeah, really a reminder for me if Facebook ever shuts down one day. And I can really relate to what Ben says as well. I just wanted to add that in there as well, because I'm not fluent in my language, and a lot of, even when I learned from dictionaries and elders, and particularly my own grandmother, people say it's still wrong. So I'm like, I don't know what I can do. Trying my best.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks to everyone for sharing. We're just about at the end of our hour together, so I don't want to take too much of everyone's time. But let me ask if Robert or Sally Coco, do you have any final words of insight or encouragement you'd like to give to our 3 social language advocates?
Well, I would just reiterate what I said earlier. Just jump in, just do it, just keep it going. I think you guys are doing good things, and it'll pay off in the long run.
Professor Mufuni, would you like to offer any last advice?
Well, I agree with Robert. I think that you deserve a lot of encouragement. This is being created really in a positive way, and thank you very much for setting up models for other people to follow.
Yeah, well, thank you all of you for what you're doing and taking that risk to put yourselves out there just to share your love for your language, encourage people to use it and learn it. Thanks for taking your time to come and be with us in this webinar. Hope it's been encouraging, helpful for you as well as for those who are listening. Obviously, there was a lot more that we could have talked about. This conversation could go on for hours, but we hope it continues in other venues, wherever you are. Maybe you'll be able to talk with more friends or share more with other people online about what you're doing. So thanks for being a part of it. It's been really a pleasure. Glad you're all able to join us, and hope you have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are.
Thank you, everybody.
Merci. Thank you.
Thank you.